On to all the elders and the emo, all the brothers and sisters that make up this great congregation. Yahushua speaks from beginning to end. Hallelujah, praise the Most High. We're going to get started. Somebody said I gave a teaser. Well, it's not going to be a teaser this week, so let's get rolling. The times of the Gentiles. Countdown to Armageddon. Part 4, Part 2. Something like that. Anyhow, never mind. Let's get it moving. To the elder OvadiYah and all the other administrators who are behind the scenes, and Yahushua speaks from beginning to end, makes it happen. Make sure that we can get online and, always open it up with very appropriate, set-apart music. So I'm going to get right into this part 2. Last week we started this off because see, it's a history to this. That what we saw about JFK and 9/11 and all that, how that's come together all the way from the 60s to so-called 2001, that make-believe they made out about all those buildings fell. There's no doubt about that. But how did they fall and by whose hand? Whose hand did they fall? Wasn't the one they claimed. Because if that was the case, they went straight to Saudi Arabia and bombed it to the ground, which they did not do. So, we looked at 9/11. We looked at some things that would give an idea of whether it happened like it happened. And we saw from the evidence that we reviewed that 9/11 was a false flag attack. Something happened, but not what they say. Most of the alleged hijackers, 9/11 hijackers who crashed those planes, so to speak, this is the age of holographic images. They can make you think you see something, but you haven't seen anything. So they made it appear that these so-called Saudi nationals crashed into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon some kind of way, and somebody crashed in the field. They made it look to some plausible. But when in truth we learned last week that they invaded Afghanistan in order to be able to control the opium of Afghanistan. It's not a surprise that Afghanistan, so to speak, is America's longest war. Why? Because they're making more money than they're spending. They still control it. You see by the opioid plague, it's just that it's affecting them more than they targeted to affect us all those many years ago. Starting with Vietnam and continue on with Afghanistan. So let's get started. I have a short video here. It's going to show you even more about how this military-industrial complex and all the wars and destruction, and death, and disease that the great horde, the United States of America and its military, have brought upon the people. This is going back to 1961. Again, at the beginning of the Kennedy era. This is a short 2-minute clip. Let's see if I can post it in the room. If not, OvadiYah, I'll post it to you. This is a clip by former U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower. If you could access this clip. Give me a 7 in a row. The name of it on YouTube is called the U.S. Military Industrial Complex. Just search for Dwight D. Eisenhower's speech in 1961 about the military industrial complex. Okay? I hope the worldwide audience is ready. Let me see. If I got it up. Let me see. Let me check it out. And take our time today. Okay. We're going to count back from 5 to 0. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hit play.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Come on back up in the room. Let that sink in for a minute. This was 56 years ago, I believe. 56 years ago. The year that John F. Kennedy was, I believe, elected. Fact. Can I be heard? Can I be heard clearly? If I can be heard, give me a 7, please. Someone is saying that the audio is low. It's low? Okay, let me see if I can turn. I think I have it up as high as it'll go. Yeah, I do. Let me try to turn my volume up from here from the mic. Can I be heard now? If I can be heard, give me a 7. Okay, cool. Moving right along. As we were talking about last week, I want to return to the Middle East. as we turn our attention to the burden of Damascus. Let us turn to the book of Isaiah, the 17th chapter, verses 1 through 3. The book of Isaiah, the 17th chapter, verses 1 through 3. And it reads on this wise. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city. Look at it today. And it shall be a ruinous heap. Is it a ruinous heap today? The cities are rare or forsaken. They shall be for flocks, which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid. The fortress shall also cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. They shall be like the glory of the children of Israel, saith Yah, our Elohim. The burden of Damascus. How heavy has the toll of death and destruction, let alone the migrations? It would seem like it was a natural consequence of war, except for the fact this was a war that was brought about by the U.S. military complex, NATO, and all its so-called allies around the world to control, to dominate, for greed. Various parts of the world, we were talking about it last week, but now we're going to focus a little bit more on what's going on in the present. The cost of 4 years of war in Syria and the surrounding areas, you might as well say here because they involved. Back in 2015, the war, death, and injuries in Syria stood at 250,000 people to over 300,000, in fact. Many injuries, millions of refugees. Let's update it today. They claim, and most of these are from Western media sources, that over 470,000 lives have been lost today. So if they say that, you know it's many more. These are the literal and physical targets of the so-called U.S., including their friends over there in Great Britain, the UN, the EU, the NATO-sponsored, funded, inspired, led war. War on terrorism. You remember the war on drugs? You know, they got to catch a tire for whatever it is. But this is the war on terrorism in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya, in Yemen. Oh yeah, the one we didn't know about last week, Niger. And it's much, much more. They started a new campaign of NATO attacks in Somalia this week. Might say some more about it later. What is the role of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the so-called Gulf Cooperation Council? They call them the GCC. We've talked about some of the foundations when we talked about the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, that is Shiite versus Sunni Islam. Proxies in the recent war in Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, etc., etc., etc. The Islamic State. Who and what? What are the powers that this Islamic State has we've seen over the last few years come, and now they make you want to think that they are moving on from the Middle East. No, they're just going to the next phase of their plan to put these so-called Islamic State militants in Europe, in America, in Asia, and wherever they need to create a situation to justify death and destruction at their hands. I want to show you a little something. It's called the powers behind the Islamic State. Now that they only have a fraction of Syria, they used to have almost all of it. Iraq. Where did Islamic State go? Did they go the same place as Al-Qaeda? And all the other alphabet soup groups that this coalition of forces, Saudi Arabia, America, Europe, the Gulf states, and others, the United States, have created? Let me put this link in the room. It's about 20 minutes long. For the radio audience, worldwide, pull up a YouTube page. It's called, put in the search space, it's called The Powers Behind the Islamic State. 21 minutes and 18 seconds long, I believe it is. The powers behind the Islamic State. Let me put this link in the room in Hebrews. If you could access this link, give me a 7 in the room, please. If you could access this link, give me a 7 in a row. Hallelujah. Okay, let's see. Do I have it? Yeah. Let me put it here. Just a minute. Countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hit play. 21 minutes.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. We're continuing our coverage of the ongoing turmoil in Iraq. Now with the rise of the extremist group, the Islamic State, the drums of war in Iraq are beating louder and louder in the mainstream press. I'm pleased to welcome our guest, Nafeez Ahmed, to help us put things in perspective. Nafeez is a best-selling author, investigative journalist, and international security scholar who writes regularly for The Guardian. He has a new novel out called 0 Point, which he says anticipated the Iraq crisis that's going on right now. Thanks for joining us, Nafeez.
Thanks, Jessica.
So, Nafeez, there's ISIL, there's ISIS, there's the Islamic State, IS, some people are calling it, but they're all the same group, right? Can you sort of give us a sense of the evolution of this extremist group and how they got started?
Well, the origins of the group come from militant groups affiliated to Al-Qaeda that were operating in Iraq and Syria. And that's where it gets murky because, as we know, these groups were kind of engaged in all kinds of militant activity fighting the Assad regime. They were also active in responding to US occupation after the 2003 invasion. So there's a mix of different actors involved. So in Iraq, you know, we had elements of even the Ba'ath Party and ex-Saddam supporters who were actually, according to many reports, they were being recruited by all these Al-Qaeda militants. And in Syria, you know, we had this increasing kind of, you know, the borders, the separation between the Iraq groups and the Syria groups, it became increasingly, you know, much more porous because, you know, they were fighting back and forth, they were crossing borders. And what makes it more murky is how these groups really became as kind of virulent and kind of influential as they have, which is really the kind of, you know, you follow the money. And you follow the money, we're looking at the involvement of the Gulf states, which have really empowered these groups over time and increased their ability to operate. They've increased their arms, logistical training. So we've had the Saudis engaged in funding these groups in Syria.
Do we have proof of this?
We have absolute proof. I mean, it's really a matter of public record. It's come out from you've got a range of different forms of evidence, from documents produced by West Point military analysts to investigative reports by journalists on the ground writing for publications like New York Times, Washington Post. So it's very clear, and we've had official, semi-official, and official confirmations from the CIA, from people in the State Department, other people in the Pentagon, even from British officials, that they've been involved in coordinating the Gulf states and supplying these kinds of virulent groups that we know are affiliated to Al Qaeda to basically topple Assad. And that's obviously had a direct blowback effect in Iraq, because these very same groups that were being supported are now streaming across the border, and they've now formed this kind of breakaway group, which is started off as an ISIS or ISIL or whatever, and now call themselves the Islamic State. And what makes it really more disturbing is going deeper into that evidence of the role of the Saudis and the Qataris and Kuwait, which has been confirmed by various different sources, is really the way in which the US and the UK have overseen that process. And that's something which isn't so much not acknowledged in the mainstream, that actually Britain and the United States were involved in knowingly kind of facilitating the support to these groups, despite knowing their links to Al Qaeda going back as early as 2009.
Wow, how did they support these groups?
So we had, you must remember the big batch of files that was obtained by WikiLeaks from the private intelligence company Strategic Forecasting Stratfor.
Yes.
So that batch of files contained some really interesting correspondence, including correspondence where some senior executives at Stratfor were describing meetings that they had had with senior Pentagon officials and senior US Army officials, where those officials openly described how US Special Forces and British Special Forces had been operating in Syria before long before the kind of major civil unrest that kind of really broke out. And they had been operating in kind of supporting these groups. And it was very clearly stated by these officers at the time, and the emails are there, people can check them out. And I've written about them in some of my Guardian articles and some of my other articles elsewhere, that they quite explicitly said that this is about destabilizing the Assad regime from within. They had even explored the possibility of airstrikes on targets, but the favored policy was using these groups as a proxy force to destabilize Assad's regime.
Remind us again, why do they want to destabilize Assad so badly?
So there's a lot of different kind of ways of looking at this, and I think it's difficult to kind of pinpoint which one is necessarily the most important one. But one of the ones that I'm focused on is the role that Assad has played in kind of cozying up to Russia, allowing Russia to kind of develop a foothold. And that's kind of tied to this increasing pipeline geopolitics in the region. So you've got this interesting kind of geopolitical jockeying over pipelines running across Syria from this field that is a kind of disputed field that Iran has access to, and also Qatar has access to. Now, the exact border of that field is a little bit disputed. And both Iran and Qatar have been trying to kickstart ways to get that field into production. The pipelines would cross Syria, and they would basically, ideally supply, Europe. These are very ambitious projects. Some people have raised lots of questions about whether these projects are really just pipe dreams in a sense. Are they viable really, given the politics of the region? And this kind of stuff has been going on for years. They've been discussing these kind of ideas. But there was definitely real efforts to get these projects kind of off the table. So Iran signed a memorandum with Syria. Qatar had been having real negotiations with Saudi and Turkey and other countries. So these were kind of two competing pipeline routes. And obviously, the US favored the one which would involve Qatar, and wasn't very happy with the one that involved Iran, and kind of would favor Russia. The United States has, from a long time, wanted to ensure that it kind of sidelines Russia and Iran in all of these various pipeline projects. So when Iran signed this kind of memorandum with Assad, that was kind of considered like a major kind of strategic setback, and something kind of needs to be done. And apart from that, there were also many other, there's generally other kind of geopolitical issues, apart from the fact that Russia has a military base there. There's also issues such as the role that Assad has played in relation to the Middle East conflict, the support that they've provided to Hamas, to their relationship with the Iranians, and that whole general thing. So there's this general perception of Syria being this part of this kind of so-called axis of evil, in a way, you know. So the whole pipeline thing kind of accelerated that fear, I think, and made them want to do something. And they had a lot of indications that the different crises that Syria is going through domestically, economic crisis, there was a widespread drought due to climate change that was accelerating, and we even have State Department cables, also leaked by WikiLeaks, where literally we have State Department officials talking about how there is going to be, you know, civil unrest in Syria very soon, very likely because of food prices and the strain on food due to these droughts and due to the effects of farmers. So they knew something was going to kick off in Syria. They knew that there was going to be popular uprising of some kind, and it seems that they planned to kind of exploit that, to get some of these jihadist guys in there, hijack that movement, direct it in a way that they felt they could control. But of course, as we've seen, you know, it's kind of gone out of control.
It is out of control,
yeah.
and I mean, I actually have been personally affected by some of this because I shared on the program earlier that I lost my friend, Jim Foley. He was a journalist who was covering the Syrian conflict, and these men who beheaded him, let's not mince words here, they're not good guys. I mean, these are extremists, fanatics that are distorting Islam to rise to power, and there are going to be folks out there who are going to say, you know what, Nafis, we need to figure out a way to stop these guys. You know, we're hearing more aggressive language by politicians saying that we possibly even boots on the ground, things of that nature. So there's sort of this impulse to use aggression in order to combat some of this. What would you say to folks like that based on the context?
Well, the first thing, I think, that it's very important to grasp the role that our governments have played in fomenting the crisis that we see. The rise of ISIS was kind of predictable, and it's something that some analysts have warned about civil war in Iraq for years. I guess how the accelerated nature of what we're seeing, you know, most people haven't anticipated that. But it was predictable, and when we look at the way in which we've been funding some of these groups, it's kind of ironic that we have the very same people now calling for boots on the ground, calling for a response, are the same people that have been very loud in their support for arming some of the most virulent elements of these rebel groups. And even though the Obama administration, for instance, has given a lot of lip service saying that we only want to fund, you know, the kind of moderate rebels and so on and so forth, but the Obama administration has actively coordinated the financing that has come from the Gulf states to the very types of groups that they historically have always favored, which is the most virulent jihadist, Al-Qaeda affiliated organizations. So there is a contradiction here in what we're being told now and the way in which policymakers have kind of created this crisis and now not taking responsibility for this crisis. And there is an argument to be made, I think, and it's unclear to, you know, I wouldn't put this forward as a kind of a firm interpretation of what's happening, because I think there are many different actors and many different interests at play. But if we look at some of the reports that we've had over the last few years of the plan of the region, there are certainly elements in the Pentagon of a neoconservative persuasion who have seen the rise of this kind of group in a way as a boon to reconfigure the Middle East. Now, the evidence for that comes from a range of quite credible sources. So one of the sources I looked at was a publicly available RAND report that was published a couple of years. It was commissioned by the U.S. Army, and it was a kind of a thought piece. It was a policy briefing. It was looking at policy options for the United States in essentially reconfiguring the Middle East and exploring how to counter terrorism. But those policy options were pretty Machiavellian in some ways. Very. I mean, obviously there were strategic calculations, and the overarching objective ostensibly was countering terrorism. But what they proposed to do was very worrying. There was a range of scenarios that were explored. One of them was divide and rule, openly talking about empowering Salafi jihadists to some extent in order to kind of weaken Iranian influence. Openly talking about empowering, using the Gulf states because they have access to the petroleum resources, so using them to kind of funnel support to these groups that would eventually create kind of like a vortex of intra-Muslim conflict that would get terrorists and extremists on different sides fighting each other, that would weaken all of them and allow US interests and Israeli interests to kind of consolidate their own kind of security while these guys are fighting amongst themselves. So here we see, when you have these kind of very short-sighted geopolitical kind of concepts about how to obtain a victory against counterterrorism, you can kind of see where it leads you up this really dangerous garden path, thinking that we're going to solve this problem by funding these groups. If we look at what's happening now, we look at how this funding has happened, and we look at the RAND reports, for example, you get a pretty clear indication that some of that policy seems to have been at play to some extent. How far it's gone and to what extent, no one can know. It's speculation. But that's what worries me, that, you've got this kind of hubris, that we can do this, we know what we're doing. It's the same hubris that we saw with the neocons after 9/11, pre-Iraq war, post-Iraq war, the same hubris of running into the Middle East, reconfiguring the region. Another piece of evidence that I thought was quite disturbing that I've written about in the past was this 2005, these maps from 2005 in the Armed Forces Journal, where a senior advisor to the Pentagon, responsible for, at that time, for kind of future planning in kind of warfare, was proposing that the Middle East be broken up along ethnic and religious lines to create a more peaceful Middle East. So again, you see this thread of thinking, which again, it's imperial hubris really to think that whether it's kind of motivated by good reasons or not, it's the same kind of colonial mentality we saw with the British. That we'll go in, we'll redraw the borders, we'll kind of tame the savages. So I'm concerned that that's the kind of mentality that we've seen. So talking about military intervention, boots on the ground now, in that context, is very worrying, because are we seeing that our interests are actually being kind of merged with that kind of imperial hubris? Yeah,
but Nafis, then what do we do? Because some people are saying, these groups are out of control, you're just going to get more chaos. More people are going to die. What do you do? Like, in this situation, how do we handle this?
This is a difficult question, because when you're faced with that juggernaut of a military-industrial complex that we don't quite understand, it's very opaque, and we don't know where they're going, we don't know how they're fomenting things. It's difficult to say what the answer is. The answer is certainly not to very simply just put boots on the ground and start blowing people up, because we've done that. We did that in Fallujah. We do not have our militaries, and I'm talking about the British military, the US military. We do not have a great track record of doing counterinsurgency war. When we do counterinsurgency war, we tend to demonize the entire civilian population. And what's happening now in Iraq is the Islamic State has gone into Iraq, the so-called Islamic State has gone into Iraq in the context of a repressive US-backed regime, which was presided over by Maliki, which basically has pursued very ethnic sectarian policies. It's overseen mismanagement, economic mismanagement of oil production and all kinds of stuff. And that's really created this groundswell of opposition to obviously the US, obviously to the existing government. It's created disillusionment with the existing political process, and that's given, that's created the recruiting sergeant really for these guys to come in. So you go to somewhere like Fallujah, and they've been having up. We've not seen it in the mainstream press, but they've been having, long before ISIS came in or Islamic State came in. We had uprisings in Fallujah.
Yeah, definitely. We covered that here.
Absolutely.
But then what do we do, Nafeez? I mean, I'm going to push you on this a little bit.
So what do we do? I mean, I think on the one hand, I think the first thing is, in terms of we need to cut off the source. So there's been a lot of press reports about, the Islamic State have basically gone in and they've looted cities and they've got loads of money and they're kind of self-funding. And I've got no doubt that they were looting cities and they've boosted their economic power. But the fact is that what's been kind of suppressed by that kind of, what I would say kind of somewhat banal reporting, which actually has relied on some questionable anonymous sources, what they've not looked at is that money trail, which is coming from the Gulf states. We have abundant evidence. The US military has abundant evidence. The State Department's been tracking this for years. So has the FBI. We know very well where the funding is coming from. That funding is coming from the Gulf states. We have not moved to stop that funding. Since 9/11, there have been political obstacles, bureaucratic obstacles, and intelligence officials, very sincere guys who've been tracking this, have been complaining that we've been blocking that for political reasons, blocking real action to cut that down. So the regulatory mechanisms to sort that out have been, they're not being pursued, and that's on the British scene, on the American scene, on the European scene. So that needs to be done. Where's the will to stop that? And why is it not being stopped? If we really will stop these guys, why are we not doing that? So that raises a fundamental question. If we're not willing to cut off the source of funding for these kind of movements, that raises questions on what we're doing. So that would be the first step, I would say. Second step, I would say, we need to be looking at how to make Iraqi democracy genuinely robust. At the moment, our interests are in focusing on accessing the oil. I mean, that's literally what our reconstruction has been all about. It's been about protecting the oil industry, getting that oil production going, playing off the Kurds against the Maliki government, and so on and so forth. Trying to facilitate American contracts, getting production to kind of kickstart overall to many different oil companies, whether they're American or not, so that we can get oil prices down. That's been the focus. It's not been about the Iraqi people. It's not been about democracy and participation. If we can enfranchise the existing population and play that slightly long-term game, then we can cut off ISIS's support, and they won't be able to have that juggernaut of power and support, because it's that guerrilla warfare needs the civilian population to kind of begin to start supporting them. If we can cut that off, I think we can really sort things out in Iraq. But again, the will to do that isn't there. It's very short-sighted. The airstrikes, a lot of analysts have pointed out that the airstrikes we've had have not really been about even dealing with the humanitarian crisis in Iraq. It's been about very narrowly focused on protecting our interests in the Kurdish oil region. So again, we need, even if we're going to have if that intervention is going to be on the table, we need to be looking at how that intervention is couched. What are the interests of that intervention? Is this really going to be about sorting out the population of Iraq and taking responsibility for the mess that we've created and doing something about it, or is this another short-sighted, narrow, interested kind of operation? So if we want to talk about that debate, and people are going to talk about it, that's what it should be about, really.
Yeah, and that's a debate we want to keep here at The Real News. Nafeez Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us in studio.
Thanks.
All right, come on back up in the room. Yeah, he's a little long-winded, but he's right on point. It's nothing about what they say it's about. That's one thing we have to realize. It's nothing about democracy, whatever the hell it is. It's nothing about freedom. It's certainly nothing about the Most High Yah. It's about greed. Mainly, it's about control on another level. But see, these are the things that they say. You're not gonna find this on CNN. You're not gonna find this in the mainstream media. Period. Because they doing what their bosses say do. You got to support, and we'll support you. You know how this whole thing goes. They down on anybody that wants to say something different than the narrative that they promote, that they are there. What was it? Iraq was weapons of mass destruction, and Libya was oppression of the Gaddafi was oppressing his people. He's always oppressed his people. That ain't that was it. Just wasn't getting what you wanted out of it. You supported it. You know, it's funny how they change sides. You know what I'm saying? They change sides very easy. It's like they support Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and all. They know they started all these wars. They know they supply the weaponry that they buy from America and from Britain. You know, it's kind of like one hand washes the other. That's the bottom line of this. So stop saying you're going somewhere to save somebody. You're in Afghanistan, you know, so you can, you know, save the Afghanis when you're really there for the opium. You know, call a spade a spade.
Really? America, the United States.
But you know, the whole world, the universe, you know, as they see it, you know, we with the Most High Yah, and however He orchestrate all this and make things happen, hey, bring it on. But they think that they are manipulating everything. They turn it all around. They make you think that all these other people are the boogeyman, when in fact they are. They talk about Russia taking over this, or they talk about China doing that, or they talk about somebody else doing something. And you know, these are just practice. And you know what they say about you. They got plans for you, you know, FEMA camps and all that kind of stuff. You know, they got it laid out, so they think. The plan is, you know, well advanced if you take their word for it. But the devil is a lie. Well, let's keep seeing. Let's keep examining this situation. Let me see here. What I got here? In the era of Donald Trump. Now, you know, the interesting thing about him is that it wasn't no accident he won. That was the plan. You know, they always make it seem like, Hillary was supposed to win and that mattered. You know, they kind of like was hedging their bets. You know, it wouldn't have made any difference which one won. On one level, it's just that they know in Trump they have an absolute maniac that's going to do whatever they want. You know, first of all, he tried to keep them off of him. So whatever he lied about going into the elections and all that, I don't even believe in elections, but that was what happened, you know, according to anything that we can get our hands on. So now everything is being reset. You know, just, you know, not less, but more of the above, with a Trump twist to it.
No, but a Jagger.
You know, we just, you know, that's instead of a
lot of adjectives.
Obama twist and a Bush twist, is a Trump twist. Okay, let me see where I'm at. Getting ahead of myself here. Okay, let me see. I'm gonna pass over that one. Let me see here. What I got here. Bear with me a minute. No, I'm gonna show this. Okay. Now, before the election results was, you know, certain, you know, and you know, people who didn't already know that Trump was going to win. You know, like the man was saying in that past video, you know, he was pretty much on it, you know, according to what the plan is, because that's been the plan everywhere. Like I said, Libya, you know, Gaddafi was getting too strong and he was upsetting their plans. They couldn't let him go to the gold standard no more than they could let Iraq do it. So, you know, the Illuminati, the deep state, the military industrial complex, by whatever name you want to refer to them, they were all one and the same. They got the same game plan. They don't care about anything but what their agenda is. They think it's their agenda. But it's just playing out on the stage. Because at the appointed time, the Most High is going to get his recompense. We know it. We know it's true. All we have to refer to is the book of Joel. And we can see very clearly it's a plan. But it's not their plan, it's the plan of the Most High Yah. Okay, on this earth, I want to show you something. Just a minute. Let me go here. There's many things going on right now. So let me get ahead of myself. Okay, here's a 13-minute piece that I want you to see. Before I leave this so-called ISIS subject. You know ISIS is just a creation. And you know, at this particular point, they're being, let's say, phased out. They're being phased out in the Middle East, so to speak. Oh, there'll be a new boogeyman, it just won't be ISIS. They'll change the name, you know, and the characters and do it another way. But there wasn't no accident that all those people immigrated to Europe. You know, they got on so-called boats, you know, falling all in the sea. Yeah, some of them, you know, they had to be sacrificed. But the thing was, they got to gain total control. Whether it be United States, whether it be Europe, wherever it be in the world, they must gain total control. So ISIS is exportable. Whoever ISIS is. Doesn't matter, you know, all they got to do is get somebody to play at. You know, be it the same, you know, a patsy like they had, you know, did with the Kennedy situation with Oswald and kill him. You know, and all these other people that they have running around, you know, all these false flag attacks, like the two African people there in England, the kid supposed to cut that soldier's head off, and he had him laying up way up the hill, laying in the street. You know, they can invent, you know, it's Hollywood. They can bring about an event, whatever type of scenario that they want. But no, it's all connected. It's not make-believe. It, you know, in their eyes, in what their plan is, you know, they think they're on point. Okay, let me see what I got for you. Let's see here, just a minute. I don't like this guy too much, but I think he had a little something to say in this 13-minute clip. Go to YouTube and put up there in the top, let's arm ISIS to fight Russia. For those in the radio audience, let's arm ISIS to fight Russia. It's a YouTube video. Put that in the top there. And for those that are in the room, let me put this link in the room. You can have it in the room, please. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hit play. We're not going to look at all of it.
Well, it was former Brigadier General Robert H. Scales, the Fox News military analyst, that called for, quote, it's time to start killing Russians to save Ukraine and fill up a lot of body bags. And he's the same Pentagon general that's been proposing a limited nuclear war. And a lot of the other people at the Pentagon think we can have a nuclear war with Russia, but that might not be a bad idea. That's Fox News. al-Nusra, that is Al-Qaeda. That is Al-Qaeda.
Mm-hmm.
You've already turned them loose to run around for 5 years, murdering hundreds of thousands. And so now you have the junior league to recruit young people around the world called ISIS. And I'm going to break down exactly who runs who in a moment and why the Russians just blew up the al-Nusra command base. Because that's the, quote, moderate rebels. And that's who NATO and the Pentagon have people in there advising. I'll bet you my bottom dollar Western advisors were killed in these Russian strikes. Because the White House, NATO, France especially, and then Saudi Arabia #1 and Turkey are quarterbacking the entire attack. That's why the foreign ministry yesterday, you can pull this up, went public warning the Russians that they would, quote, escalate military action if the Russians didn't pull out. And Saudi Arabia isn't playing games. They funded and they ran with Osama bin Laden as their top officer the clandestine attack with General Hamid Gul, who's been on this show, doesn't go on any other Western shows, to defeat the Russians in the Afghan war in the 1980s. And the Saudi Arabians that have the largest military arsenal in the Middle East, bigger than Israel's, conventionally, they have threatened to all-out attack Russia now. This has escalated to insane asylum levels. And so the Russians' response this morning was to launch 8 airstrikes on the al-Nusra command bases and totally destroy it. Al-Qaeda gives the orders. Al-Nusra is Al-Qaeda. That's on record. I'm going to read mainstream news saying that. They're like, why are the Russians blowing up Al-Qaeda? Well, our media says they don't have any power anymore. Al-Qaeda became IS. They fly the same flags. They're the same people. They are the Western intelligence intel base. So the Russians are trying to decapitate the command and control of ISIS in Syria. That's what you do. If you're actually trying to defeat an enemy, is you kill their leadership. You kill their military brass. You kill their commanders in the field. And you've got tens of thousands of Chinese pouring in. Ships are landing every day now. Tanks, anti-aircraft weapons, it's anti-tank weapons. It's all pouring in. Iranian troops are pouring in. Hezbollah is pouring in out of Lebanon. I mean, this is biblical, ladies and gentlemen. Vladimir Putin just conscripted 150,000 troops today to defend the Russian borders against Islamic attack because the globalists are activating terror squads in Chechnya and many other areas right now, preparing to do in the past, blowing up train stations, blowing up military bases, attacking police stations. I mean, the New World Order runs Al-Qaeda. Saudi Arabia is in the middle of it. They've been promised the entire Middle East. It is unprecedented. Headline, London Telegraph, Russia kills U.S.-backed Syrian rebels in second day of airstrikes as Iran prepares a ground offensive. Live updates. And we'll roll some more of that bomb pod footage for folks here in just a moment. We are simulcasting television right now, and Russia doesn't have a choice. Is Russia perfect? No. But did Russia start this war? Did Russia start the Ukraine war? Did Russia start the Syria war? Did Russia start the Libya war? Did Russia start the Iraq war? Did Russia fund Al-Qaeda? You understand that the 2 Boston bombing brothers, on record, had their cover blown by the Russians 2 years before the Boston bombing as CIA double agents flying under fake passports under the State Department. You understand they're out of Georgetown University. You understand they were going to Chechnya. I don't know what happened with the Boston bombing. I just know, figure that one out. That's why the FBI got caught lying, saying, we've never heard of these guys before. I mean, this is an insane time to be alive when the supposed people that carried out 9/11, the Saudi Arabian government, has threatened Russia publicly to launch terror attacks inside Russia if they don't back out of the Middle East. And then meanwhile, Russia did kind of pull out of the Middle East a few years ago, and then the West responds to start overthrowing areas of Ukraine on their border, traditionally part of Russia, and to start trying to overthrow Russia itself with color revolutions. And Russia said, okay, we have no choice. Circle the wagons, get ready for war. Just like with Napoleon, just like with Hitler. History now repeats itself yet again. But this isn't communist Russia now, hamstrung and totally controlled by Western-backed rebels that took over Russia in 1917. You know, our government with the British put the horrible scum in 1917.
That's true.
That was all basically New York, London run. But before I digress, this is just an incredible time to be alive right now. Russia moves to war footing. Putin signs decree drafting 150,000 conscripts into the military as his jets launch a new wave of airstrikes. Here are some of the other headlines up on Infowars.com. Iran, Hezbollah, Syrian army prepared to launch offensive against CIA proxies on the ground. And the air offensive has already been launched. They run the headline that the USA is in disarray, Iran troops ready. Well, there's no disarray about it. They bet on the Sunni majority, that's 79% of Muslims, that Saudi Arabia is basically dominating and controlling and bullying with Wahhabist ideology. I'm not saying Sunnis are bad people or Shiites are bad people. They kill each other constantly for over 1,000 years. The problem here and the ongoing crisis here is that this is no longer just a proxy war. This is becoming a major war with the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the Syrians lined up against NATO, Europe, the United States, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. Israel is backing the Syrian rebels. Israel came out, Netanyahu yesterday, and said they're going to begin airstrikes in areas of Syria against the Assad forces. Israel is announcing that they will fly into airspace with Russian aircraft and will start targeting the Assad forces who for 5 years have been toe-to-toe against the Saudi Arabian Turkish proxy army funded with U.S. weapons, and they killed the people at Benghazi to give them the weapons. You talk about dirty and evil. And a lot of folks don't know what to do who've been pro-Israel, because I'm not anti-Israel. But Israel, you can say, either is involved or quarterbacking it or is following orders. I don't know. I know this, they're involved in it. Following Russian airstrikes, Israeli defense minister says Israel will defend its interest in Syria. And then again, they go on to announce they're going to start airstrikes against Assad forces. Assad's done nothing. Under international law, their government was democratizing. They were infiltrated. They were attacked by al-Qaeda forces. That is who Ezra is. And I'm going to skip this network break. This is so important, but only this one today. Here is the news from Reuters. Now, they spin this, but in the article is the truth. Russian warplanes, this is the key. Russian warplanes target insurgents in Syria, but not Islamic State. Well, they're not going to target a bunch of grunts from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United States, Australia, Germany, France, the UK. They're not going to target the grunts on the ground first. They're going to target who runs them. The pro-Damascus television channel said jets carried out at least 30 strikes. They hit 8 different areas, but 30 strikes in one spot. As insurgent alliance known as the Army of Conquest, the alliance includes the Nusra Front, an al-Qaeda Syrian branch, but not Islamic State, which has declared a caliphate on swaths of Syria and Iraq. IS is the payoff to Saudi Arabia for the new Islamic State to launch new attacks worldwide in between Iraq and Syria. So that's the new breakup of Syria and Iraq. And then they just put a bunch of young, dumb idiots in there. It'll be removed later with whatever the West puts in and whatever Saudi Arabia puts in. So that's just the proxy army of wannabe cowboy, playboy, rape king, scum, filth, trash that the West has produced and Saudi Arabia has produced. The real rebels trying to overthrow Assad are al-Qaeda, that's spoilers, and the Russians just blew them up. Now, Russia's bombing, who supposedly blew up our towers on 9/11 and killed all of our Americans, and we had to give up all our rights because of it, and Russia is being attacked all over its southern belly by these very same people that our U.S. government trained on record. Our own military knows this and is speaking out and saying no. The former head of Defense Intelligence went public 2 months ago, as you know. They played the clip probably 15 times. And the response of John McCain, we're going to play it right now. The response of John McCain is, let's give them surface-to-air missiles, which he knows they've already got. They've already shot down a bunch of Syrian aircraft. The Russians just have better systems to avoid different countermeasures and have better training. And so I still think you'll probably see Russian aircraft shot down because they're going up against the best weapons Saudi Arabia, Europe, and the United States taxpayers have to offer.
You would let American planes just pass them and let them do that?
No, but I might do what we did in Afghanistan many years ago to give those guys the ability to shoot down those planes. This President, this Secretary of State, they aren't going to do anything that would escalate it. They're going to give them a free hand, just like they have given them a free hand throughout, just like we have no strategy.
That's not true. We have no strategy. The neocons especially run Obama. They're doing exactly what McCain wanted to do, but he's giving Obama right cover from the fake right attacking him, saying he has no strategy. No strategy. They have brought the weapons of Israel, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the EU and its NATO army, the UN army. That's what NATO is. And the United States military weapon supplies for 5 years, bullying the daylights out of the Syrians and killing over 300,000 of them, almost all of them civilians. Christians, Protestant and Catholic, non-radical, Alawite, peaceful Muslims, and others. And that's why they're getting rid of one of the oldest Jewish communities, one of the oldest Christian communities, and one of the oldest Muslim communities in the world is Syria, where people have lived in peace for thousands of years because it's a tolerant government. Their leaders wear suits and ties, folks, and that's why they're being removed from power. Women don't wear hoods over their heads.
Okay.
Women are free over there, just like they were in Iraq. Are they free now in Iraq? No, they're not. The West wants Stone Age barbarism over there. The globalists want Agenda 21, deindustrialization worldwide. They do their own soft kill policies here to shut off our industries, break down our families, poison us, and then when they're able to really have their way with the country, they'll dismantle and blow up the entire infrastructure like Libya. We told you they'd deindustrialize and bring that country to the ground and raise every piece of equipment they had in a scorched earth policy, and they did exactly that because we know their operations. And I want to explain something. The Soviet...
Come on back up in the room. That's enough. I think he made himself more than clear. I don't like him. I just want y'all to know that. But a piece of information here, a piece of information there, and putting it all together, you have the whole picture. Let's continue on. Now, you know, listening to Western, that is America in particular, you know, yeah, the news they put out most of the time don't tell you much. In fact, a lot of times it's an outright lie. Now, if you listen to American news, or Western news, I'm talking about the whole Queen's news too, I mean, you know, most of them. Daily Mail, you know, I'll give them some exemptions on certain things. But it's all coordinated. They get together and decide what they're going to publish. That's why in certain news outlets they don't like. They don't like Russian television and other sources that's not tied into that BBC, New York Times, that kind of a situation. However, we listen point to point and place to place. The truth as they know it and the role they have to play in this whole matter which is not the greatest. The Most Highest is the greatest. But they're getting certain things done that need to be done according to the times of the end, of the end times. Let me see here. Now, America challenges the whole world, America and her allies. They say that the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians are just waiting to pounce on everybody around the world. I'm going to try to put this link in here. The source is, it's kind of hard to get to. Let me see. Okay, but let me first put it in the room. I'll try to make it available otherwise for the worldwide audience. But just a minute. Let me see if I can get this link in here. Just a minute. The link is called, you can try to find it on, try to Google worldwide radio audience. Try to Google it. Let me see. The title is The Trump Reset. U.S. Empire's Coming Economic Cyber Attack. It kind of cut off here. Let me see. Yeah, but Google, let me see if I can get the full link. What does it say? Oh, it don't say none of that. The Trump Reset. U.S. Empire's Coming Economic Cyber Attack. Something like that. Let me see if I can get the link in. Just a minute. If you could access this link, give me a 7 in the room, please. You might have to do it outside of the room because it's a pretty long link. It's probably too long for the room. All right, Smiley, I'm going to try to feed this to you, see if you can post it. Okay, just a minute. Okay, here's the link. If you could access that link, give me a 7 in a row, please. It didn't show up. Okay. This is not one that's going to work, I see. I was hoping. It's too long. Let's see. Can I give you the title? Like I said, put it in Google. Put the title in Google. That's it. Trump orders preparation for... Wait a minute, no, not that. That's not it. Hold on. Just a minute. I have it open here. Just a minute. I think I have it open. Okay. Try to reach it this way on Google. It's called the number of U.S. military bases around the world. It's from the group called QURA. Q-U-O-R-A. Q is a map. QURA. The number of U.S. military bases around the world. It'll blow your mind. You can access that link. It's a Google page. The title is The Number of U.S. Bases Around the World. It's from the group called QURA. Right. The number of bases, the number of U.S. military bases around the world. As they say, it's more than one way to skin a cat. Okay, we got one. Let's see here. See if I can get it from the link that you all have. Let's make sure we're on the right thing. It says U.S. bases near Russia is the title of it in the QURA website of maps. It's about the fifth one down. I said no mic. If I can be heard, would you give me a 7, please? Okay. The name of the map is U.S. bases near Russia. Okay. Look at all those bases. These are U.S. military bases. You see Russia up there in the light green. But these are all bases that surround not only Russia, but if you look and you see in the middle, down in the middle of in purple, you see Iran. Look at all the military bases that surround Iran. Look at the military bases on that same map that surround China. They're out in the sea, Japan, and all those places, and they're in Europe as well. You see what I mean? Now, who's threatening who? Scroll up. There's one military bases there. You see the map of Africa. You were saying, someone was saying, I believe it was Elder Jacob, he was saying that he didn't know there was a military base in Niger. Look at that map. It looks like it's about the third map on this page. All those brown dots are U.S. military bases in and around Africa. My question is, what for? It's not about military. Only in the sense that it's ultimately about the resources. Look at those African countries that have a military, U.S. military presence. Look at Niger. You see it there? You got 1, 2, 3, 4 bases in Niger. What's it about? The United States, aside from seeking to control, they are setting up a major drone operation in Niger. So whoever they don't like, you will be the recipient of strike. Look at the rest of this page on your own, but you'll see that the U.S. military, they don't care nothing about resources anymore, in the sense that they got to go out and all these factories and things. They control the airways. They control the countries by having all of these military installations all over the earth. They surrounded Russia. They're surrounding China. They're surrounding the Middle East, so to speak. They're all over the world. So, you wonder where the money went? What did Dwight D. Eisenhower say in 1961? Beware of the U.S. military industrial complex. All over the world, they have their footprint. They have all kinds of bases. From one end of the earth to the other. Who is the #1 war machine? America. They don't have to control the company if they can control the military aspect with drones and bombers. And Russia's not the threat, though they like to make it seem like. We know that the war between the king of the north and the king of the south has to take place, as written in the book of Daniel. But who's? America's afraid of losing their place. They've studied history. They know that empires have come and gone. Where's Rome today? Where's Greece today? And all the other. Where's Babylon? So like them, the United States thinks that all these bases is going to help them outlast the plan of the Most High Yah. Ain't so. It ain't going to be so. The Most High is running this. Yeah, they got, China's all surrounded. And looks like that, they think that, China's going to take, they already own most of the things in America. And for what it's worth, China probably will take the lead. But they want to try to make it where their lead in their, their game won't amount to anything, because they'll bomb them out of existence, or so they think. They think that they got that kind of power. But you can tell they don't believe in the Most High Yah. They don't understand Yah's plan. Moving right along, I just want you to see those maps. Look at it on your own time further. Just a minute. Keeping it moving. Just a few short things more. Let me see. Well, I Google out the stuff. I'm just going to pick and choose a few things. Okay. Now you all know this so-called deal that they made that the United States and several European countries. I've talked about it before when they did it. This deal, this Iran deal. Well, it looks like Donald Trump, in the era of Donald Trump, they plan to dismantle this deal with the help of Israel and others. They call themselves, they want to fix this bad deal. It is a bad deal, but, you know, they're not in real control. The Most High is. It is a bad deal. Why? It's a bad deal because of the hand that they played. Hold on a second. Let me give you this link. Hold on a minute. For the worldwide audience, pull up a Google page and Google "The Iran deal is dead. Long live the Iran deal." The Iran deal is dead. Long live the Iran deal. And for those of us in the room, okay, I think, if I can still be heard, give me a 7, please. If I can still be heard, give me a 7. Elder Carmel, you might have to reboot. Whatever's happening, if your sound is on your end. Hallelujah. Keep it moving. Let me see if you can get this link. We'll post this link in the room. The Iran deal is dead. Long live the Iran deal. Okay? Let's see here. You can access this link. Give me a 7 in a row, please. You can access this link. Give me a 7 in a row. Okay. Okay? Good. The Iran deal is dead. Long live the Iran deal. The U.S. must avoid losing sight of the Iranian regime's key objectives and priorities, and instead pursue close talks with its European allies, Israel, Iran's Arab neighbors, and even Russia, according to this journalist. President Donald Trump's new Iran strategy marked an important strategic shift in the United States policy toward the country. The new measures proposed by the president, if fully implemented, will contain the decrease the Islamic Republic's threat to U.S. interests in the region. Now, you saw that map of who's surrounding who, including its allies, strategic partners, and waterways crucial to global energy security. Like the way you said that. To fully implement these new measures and reach their respective objectives, the United States must avoid losing sight of the Iranian regime's key objectives and priorities. Further, a successful U.S.-Iran strategy must close talks and deeper cooperation with its European allies, Israel, Iran's Arab neighbors, and even Russia. What bothers them so much? I'm not going to read any further. I'm going to let you read it. But the biggest thing is, I'll just make it short. The biggest deal is this so-called deal that they struck did nothing to control Iran's nuclear technology. I mean, not its nuclear technology, but its missile technology, it's left unabated or unmonitored by this so-called deal they made. Another aspect is the fact that now that hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars have been released, according to this deal, Iran has more money, you know, like the Saudis. They have more money to finance different, call it different terrorist groups around the world. You know, they are terror groups. Take my word for it, living here in Israel. You know, they are terrorist groups. You can see, you know, we live up here in the north. The influence. You know, if you get close enough to the border, which is only 45 minutes or an hour to the east of here, you know, you can sometimes hear, you know, the war over there. You can witness it. You know, you can look over to the other side and see some of the things that are going on. So, we've lived through these wars with Hezbollah, who shoot various types of missiles over into Israel. At this point, they probably can reach the whole country. In the past, it's been northern Israel, and in the last war in 2006, they can reach Tel Aviv from the Lebanese border. So, it's for real. When you see those buildings destroyed in downtown Tel Aviv, you know it's for real. But we ain't worried about that. Not at all. But it's for real. Moving right along. I want to show you something. Now, you know all this clamor about North Korea, right? You know, North Korea is the boogeyman of today. Why? Okay, they have missile technology. If they ever get it right a little bit, you know, with some of the things they're trying to do, then they might be a itty-bitty, teeny-weeny kind of a threat to whom I don't know. Maybe the Japanese. But I want to show you something. Just to underscore the ridiculousness of these threats they make on North Korea. Now, those in the worldwide radio audience, Google this article. It's called North Korea's Air Force is total junk, but it can still kill.
Wow.
That's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you in Yahushua's speech from beginning to end, I want you to just open up this link. Just a minute. You can access this link. Give me a 7, please. You can access that link. Give me a 7 in a row, please. Okay. All right. Look at that.
What?
Does that look like a plane that could threaten? What are these planes that America has? Any of them that they've made in the last 50 years. This is the cream of the North Korean Air Force. They couldn't even afford no paint. for the plane. Look at it. So, all this mess that Donald Trump is talking about, I mean, it's a joke. They still driving around in wood-burning trucks in North Korea. Don't believe me? Check it out for yourself. Wood-burning trucks. You know, it's got a little oven in. I mean, it's like a little, like a potbelly heater in the, you know, in the back of the truck. I'm talking about a pickup truck, man. And they got to put wood in it so that the thing moves. So this how ridiculous this is. But, you know, the United States Army, Navy, you know, that whole thing, they want to challenge anybody that they can, because they know people don't know. Yeah, F-14s, F-16s, and all, you know, all these stealth, this and that, and the other. Is this a challenge to that? Well, you see the headline. You can tell this is a Western news item. With this, but he can still kill. What, by diving in on somebody and crashing? Yeah, maybe. Look at it. He don't even have paint. And those are gas tanks. Those are not bombs. Up under the wing. No, it's not. One other thing I want to go through here. China is a challenge. China is a challenge. They're not like North Korea. They not only have a modern military, they have money. Whereas America is broke, China is not. By no means. But you never hear anything about it. And yes, America, as we saw, has China encircled. Out in the water, on land, however they had to do it. China is going through a phase in their development called One Belt, One Road Plan. Pull up a Google page. Those of you all in the worldwide radio audience. It's called One Belt, One Road Plan. China's Marshall Plan is much more. Just a minute. You can access this link that I'm about to put in the room. Give me a 7 in the room, please. If you could access that link, give me a 7 in a row, please. Okay? Dateline. China's Marshall Plan is much more. China's One Belt, One Road initiative is no Marshall Plan. It's far more ambitious. Let me read a little bit of it. Chinese President Xi Jinping just announced that China will establish a Silk Road Fund with $40 billion to support infrastructure investments in countries involved in the One Belt, One Road plan. China has plenty of money. America was broke. The new proposal is in addition to the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank proposed that 21 countries have already that 21 countries have already joined. A critical element of such plans is to break the connectivity bottleneck in Asia and beyond, which has seriously hindered development in many developing countries. Presumably, and they're going off the dollar too, presumably a large amount of funding will go to building roads, railways, and ports in these countries, not just China. Thus, many analysts see, for example, here, and here, you see you have some links there it goes to, you can look at it on your own, have labeled China's new initiatives as Chinese version of the Marshall Plan, indicating that China would use such initiatives to seek and influence even dominance in Asia. Now, this is aside for a second. Now compare that to America. Today in America, you have all the factories are mostly gone, many of them anyway, especially blue-collar kind of factories. Now, they still got some high-tech going on, but the everyday regular jobs, like, you know, I'm sure they got still a few factories, you know, like Ford or something like that, General Motors, maybe a few, you know, but not many, not like it used to be. It used to be another way. It makes you wonder, as we're discussing this military-industrial complex and the worldwide reach of America, how can they afford it? We see where the money goes. The money is on the military. It's no way in the world. In fact, I think the budget is something close to $1 trillion a year. It's no wonder that there's no jobs. It's no wonder that the cities are all dilapidating and there's problems. It's no wonder that they're fomenting hatred between the people. You know, they created a whole new Ku Klux Klan. They took their hoods off. They come out openly in the era of Donald Trump. This is not by accident. This is a plan. Yeah, they got a fancy name, alt-right. For one. You know, Black Lives Matter. And all of these other alphabet soups of distraction. Because that's all it is. You go to college, you borrow some money, you never get out of debt. These are subjects for another day. I'll talk with America about America later. But how can they spend $1 trillion on the military when conditions and situations across America, I'm not there, so I don't have a bird's eye view. But I have relatives like everybody else. You know, some are doing okay. You know, the last of the middle class. But all in all, they're trying to get it on. We see this in the worldwide arena, and we know that this exists, not only in America, because this is a worldwide community now, but in the islands. You think it's military bases around the world. You should see the military bases in Puerto Rico. But yet they can't send them in. I bet the bases are running. I bet the bases have electricity. The bases have food. And they have many in Puerto Rico. But they can't help the people. It's a sign of the times. It is what it is. And it will continue. Read the rest of this article on China on your own. I'm going to call this part to the end. Just a minute. Been kind of under the weather this week. Well, 2 weeks. Truth be told. I have one other thing I want you to see. It's a video. 9 minutes and 37 seconds. About this global domination plan. A shifting of civilizations. Like Rome fell and others, the Greeks and everybody else, America has to fall. But there's a new empire on the face of the earth. But however long it lasts. Don't expect it to be too long. I want to show you this 9 minute and 37 second clip. Just a minute. For the worldwide audience, pull up a YouTube page. Put in the search space. China's Global Domination Plan. One Belt, One Road. China Uncensored. China's Global Domination Plan. One Belt, One Road. China Uncensored. For those of you in the room, pull up this link. You can access this link. Give me a 7 in a row, please. You can access this link. Give me a 7 in a row, please. Okay, let me get it in myself. Okay.
On this episode of China Uncensored, China...
Hold your horses. Okay, count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hit play.
On this episode of China Uncensored, China's secret plan to take over the world. What's that, Shelley? It's not a secret. They just held a huge conference about it in Beijing. Dozens of world leaders were there. And we have footage? Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. It's the biggest global economic investment project in modern times. Bigger even than Newt Gingrich's proposed moon colony. Yeah, remember when that was the weirdest thing that happened in the presidential election? Anyway, this global economic investment project involves more than 60 countries and $1 trillion, which is more than the combined GDP of the smallest 97 nations, or the price of 28 moon colonies. And the whole thing is being led by the benevolent leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. It's called One Belt, One Road, or for short, OBOR. On Sunday, heads of state from 29 countries gathered at Beijing's Great Hall of the People for the Belt and Road Forum, or for short, BARF, which is how I feel right now. Especially because all of China's favorite political strongmen were there. Turkish president for life with sweeping new powers, Recep Erdogan. Filipino president and proud killer of drug suspects, Duterte. And president and former KGB agent, Vladimir Putin. Just look at that swagger. You think I could take you in fight? Maybe not fight. So why is China trying to gather all these nations together? Well, as Xi Jinping explained on Monday, countries need to stick together like swan geese. Because, quote, swan geese are able to fly far and safely through winds and storms because they move in flocks and help each other as a team. Yes, swan geese fly together. Swan geese fly together. Quack, quack, honk, honk, honk.
Good
The point
God.
is, Xi is clearly expecting winds and storms and is looking for strength in numbers. So what is this trillion-dollar flying V-shaped globalization initiative with China at the helm? I'll let China's state-run English TV network, CGTN, explain.
China states that the Belt and Road Initiative is a systematic project, which is built upon the principle of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits.
Could we go back to the swan geese part, because that was easier to understand? If only someone could explain One Belt, One Road in a simple way, like for children.
The belt connects the land, the road is on the sea, the promise that brings prosperity.
Okay, I get the belt part. It's a metaphor for how Xi Jinping keeps his pants so high. But a road that moves on the sea? Wait a minute. Is this about those artificial islands in the South China Sea? Are they building moving roads now to connect them all? Anyway, state-run New China TV, please continue. The Belt and Road is how? As in the Chinese word for good? Oh.
Let's hear you.
Congratulations to Chinese state-run media for really upping their propaganda game. But maybe you're still not clear what One Belt, One Road actually is. Maybe one of the other children's videos by Chinese state-run media can explain.
Once upon a time, several routes went from China through Central Asia to Europe. It was called Silk Road. A few years ago, China's president Xi Jinping proposed making new routes like the old routes, but even bigger.
But that's pretty much the gist of it. China wants to be the new world leader, not through actually colonizing the world with military force, which frankly never turns out well. Ask the British. No, China wants to rule with economic force. One Belt, One Road is about building giant infrastructure projects in Asia, Europe, and Africa. Mainly things like roads, rail lines, tunnels, bridges, seaports, and power plants. In theory, this will bring resources and power to China and money and goods to everyone. You know, joint prosperity. China is pledging around $1 trillion with tens of billions spent so far. According to China's Caixin magazine, 50 Chinese state-owned enterprises have invested in nearly 1,700 projects since Xi Jinping first announced the initiative in 2013. Those include 60 energy-related projects, like gas pipelines from Russia and Kazakhstan to China. They also include high-speed train routes, like the $4 billion rail line that will send trains from Ethiopia into Djibouti. In theory, China spending billions of dollars to invest in, the joint prosperity of dozens of nations is a good thing. If countries have real economic needs, and China helps fulfill them, then China will be doing a great thing. But there are serious concerns that's not how it's going to go down. Let's take Laos, for example. Laos is a poor Southeast Asian country with a GDP of less than $14 billion. A Chinese joint venture is building a $6 billion railway project there. How can Laos afford such a huge investment, one that's projected to lose money for the first 11 years? No problem. Chinese banks will loan them the money. And if they can't pay it back, I guess Laos will just owe China a couple of favors, political favors, like supporting the Chinese Communist Party in the UN, or economic favors like signing away their mineral rights to China. Or the Chinese Communist Party could just break their kneecaps. And Laos is just one example of how China's skein of geese might turn out to be more like a kettle of vultures. A lot of poor countries are concerned that the Chinese Communist Party wants to use these infrastructure projects to make it easier for Chinese companies to extract their natural resources and get rich at the expense of the locals. I mean, in theory, this whole joint prosperity slogan is supposed to mean a win-win for everyone. At least that's what the happy multi-ethnic children would have you believe. But a lot of the infrastructure is designed to exploit oil and minerals or move goods, and not to create housing, schools, or access to clean drinking water. And that's especially an issue in poor African countries like Ethiopia and Djibouti. Corrupt local officials might get rich, but the general public, probably not. And there's another problem. China doesn't exactly have a great track record of successful infrastructure projects to begin with. This Oxford Review of Economic Policy paper analyzes 3 decades of Chinese investment data. It says, far from being an engine of economic growth, a typical infrastructure investment has destroyed economic value in China due to poor management of risks. So basically, extensive long-term data shows that the majority of Chinese infrastructure investments actually lose money. So 10 years from now, we might see a lot of busted kneecaps. There are other concerns that affect wealthier regions too, like the European Union. According to this article in The Guardian, the 28 member states of the EU decided not to support Beijing's draft statement about trade issued at the end of this past week's BARF summit. They really have got to work on those acronyms. The problem? Members wanted guarantees that projects would be economically and environmentally sustainable and subject to fair tendering processes. Well, I believe the Chinese leaders have pledged to treat these projects like they're in China's own backyard, so I'm sure they'll be environmentally sustainable. As for fair tendering processes, you're on your own. But I'm not saying it's wrong for China to look out for its own interests. Of course, every country wants to make sure they get an advantage out of working or investing in other countries. But One Belt, One Road is a way that the Communist Party can exploit poor countries for China's economic and political gain, all disguised under the idea of shared benefits and joint prosperity. It sounds good on paper, or in a song, or a bedtime story, but it's not so clear whether all these swan geese are really going to get off the ground. So what do you think about One Belt, One Road? Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time.
Come on back up in the room. So if you're depending on the machinations of men, it looks like different geographical locales, different master. I can't say this. You know, the same old. I'll leave a blank on the end. I want to close with these 2 scriptures. The first one being from the book of Matthew, the 24th chapter, the 6th verse. Because man has a plan, and Yah has a plan. And Yah's plan is greater. Matthew 24th chapter, verse 6. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. The second scripture is 2nd Esdras. From the book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 15, verses 28 through 33. the terrifying vision of warfare. What a terrifying sight appearing from the east. The nations of the dragons of Arabia, Saudi Arabia and all of their allies, shall come out with many chariots. And from the day that they set out, their hissing shall spread over the earth, so that all who hear them will fear and tremble. Also, the Carmonians, the Iranians, the Persians, by whatever name they prefer today, raging in wrath, shall go forth like wild boars from the forest, and with great power they shall come and engage them in battle. And with their tusks they shall devastate a portion of the land of the Assyrians. Part of Syria today is ancient Assyria. They will devastate a portion of the land of the Assyrians with their teeth. And then the dragons, remembering their origin, shall become still stronger. And if they combine with great power and turn to pursue them, then these shall be disorganized and silenced by their power, and shall turn and flee. And from the land of the Syrians, an enemy in ambush shall attack them and destroy one of them. And fear and trembling shall come upon their army, and indecision upon their kings. May the Most High Yah bless and keep you all. We know that man has a plan, but we also know that Yah has a plan. And Yah's plan is greater. Hallelujah. 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 That's our lesson for this week. I will be bringing a weekend review. It will be related. But for now, I want to turn it over for comments, prayer, requests, song. Total Shabbat to each and every one of y'all. And with that, I relinquish this mic. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.